Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Welcome to James Bond Radio, the comics of Bond. I am your host, Jack Lugo, and today I am joined by Vita Ayala and Danny Lore, the writing team behind the new ongoing James Bond series from Dynamite Comics. Vita and Danny were a lot of fun to talk to. They had some really cool answers to the Quickfire Questions. I think all of you will get a kick out of listening to them. And at the top of the interview, they actually have a special announcement, so I'll let them get to that. And without further ado, here is Vita Ayala and Danny Lore, and my interview with them for the Comics of Bond.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond.
James Bond.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to lie.
Hello, and welcome to James Bond Radio, the comics of Bond. Today I am joined by the writing team behind the current ongoing James Bond series from Dynamite Comics, Vita Ayala and Danny Lore. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello,
Hey,
thanks
how are
for
you
having
doing?
us.
I'm very pleased to be able to talk with each of you. And I was just telling you, I was actually on my way to my son's first band recital where he's been learning to play saxophone, and I hopped on Twitter and I saw the two of you did a video and you made a big announcement. So I thought maybe we'd kick off the podcast with this announcement for our listeners. So in case anyone hasn't checked out the series yet, as of this recording, the first two issues are out. It's James Bond from Dynamite. It's a new series that just launched in December, and there was a pretty big announcement as to something that Danny and Vita are working on or will be doing with the comic that was just made right before, the day before we're doing this recording. So if you want to let our listeners know what you announced, that would be great.
Vita, you want me to take this? Or-
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So hey, I'm Danny. We are really fortunate to say that within our comic, we will get to see James Bond coming head to head with a very familiar face. He will be having to deal with Big again, one of my personal favorite villains from all of the Bond canon, which is home to quite a long list of excellent villains.
That is a pretty amazing announcement. I mean, when I've read the first two issues that have come out, and they were and I went back and reread them today, and there was like a little clue, but nothing major. Like I it wasn't something that I was like really suspecting. Oh, this is gonna end up bringing back Mr. Big. So, can you tell us a little bit about? Did you have to like seek permission to include the character, or was this your idea from the beginning? When you pitched the story?
This is Vita. And it's less of, we pitched the whole story at once. So we had to kind of get clearance for it for everyone and everything that we kind of wanted to use. This is licensed work. And so we had to run it by not just like, the company, but the people they're licensing it from, in this case, the estate. So the Fleming estate, sorry, to be more specific.
Yeah,
so yeah, we I figure you all know, but so yeah, when we were developing, we had a couple of ideas, of what we would want to do with Bond, and this one in particular just involved Big, and this was the one that they liked. So yeah.
It was actually super exciting for me, not to interrupt Vita, but that you'll see that I do that a lot. We interrupt each other. But for me, that was like we had a list of ideas, and this was kind of like on that list as that dream suggestion that I was very much like, oh, there's no way that, like this is already such, like a bucket list gift to be working on James Bond. There's no way that I also, get to touch big. There's no way. And Vita was like, just do it. Like, you never know if this is going to be your only chance to suggest it. And then we did, and we got the thumbs up. And I think I did a lot of screaming.
Yeah, there was a lot of screaming involved. It's been very difficult. Sorry, this is Vita again. It's been very difficult to not spill the beans on that for the last couple of, we've been working on it for a lot longer than it's been out. So for the last, 6 months.
Wow. So, when you say Mr. Big, are you drawing from the novel, or are you drawing from the Live and Let Die film?
So pretty much what Vita and I are doing is drawing primarily from the books, but also understanding that this is a version of Mr. Big that exists, in the
comics.
in the 2020s,
right.
This
the comic takes place in present day, which I should have said beforehand, but I forgot. Sorry.
No. It's interesting because we like Danny said, we do primarily kind of look to the books, but we do get to reimagine things about it as well, because this is, a different medium, and that's kind of why we're allowed to go back to the wells, so we can, figure out new ways to do stuff that people love.
Really? You're going to say, well, you weren't going to take the time for the pun and go for like aquarium or tank? Because I would have.
I almost said tank.
Well, yeah, maybe sharks will come in. Barracuda could come into the picture. You never know. This is really exciting. And like I said, when I started reading your series, I was going to ask you, I wasn't sure where it was going. I could say, I've been enjoying it, but I thought maybe there's a female character named Nadia. I thought maybe she'd be the main villain. But then when I heard your announcement yesterday, I was like, oh wow! Then everything started to kind of fall into place. I'm really excited for how that's going to turn out.
Danny again, but I just also wanted to say that I'm really excited that at least in your reread, you got that, you saw the hint. We weren't sure whether that was going to give away the whole game at the beginning, or it was going to be too subtle to get either way. So it makes me really happy that you were able to catch that.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Now, before we dive further in, we usually ask our guests some quick-fire questions. Now, you can sort of elaborate as much as you can, or as much as you want to, and there are no wrong answers. But we kind of give all our guests this kind of list of questions just to see where you fall on the Bond spectrum, what your kind of favorites are in terms of the franchise. So, if you're ready, we can begin.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So, 001, what is your favorite Bond film?
Skyfall. Skyfall, or this is Danny again. For me, I've always been a Bond fan. Skyfall kind of became me and my wife's big movie. She was never into Bond. She's a nerd in her own right, but that's just not really her wheelhouse. And then I had already been excited because I had loved Bond. I had loved what the Daniel Craig movies were doing with it. And then she saw that one, and then she fell in love with it. I think we ended up seeing it no fewer than 6 times in the theaters, and that's not counting how many times we've seen it. Just as one of us is in a bad mood, so the other one just gets up and quietly puts it in the PlayStation to watch again. So yeah, hands down.
Yeah, I found that when everyone kind of has their go-to Bond film, and that's really cool. Vita, do you have a favorite Bond film?
Mine is Live and Let Die.
Oh, very cool.
And very closely followed by Casino Royale. It depends on what I'm kind of story I'm feeling at the time, but those two are my go-to ones. Although I will say, shout out to GoldenEye, not necessarily for the movie, but because the game is one of the greatest games for the N64 of all time. And so
absolutely true.
It has a special place in my heart. So I have to shout out.
That is a great game. Although I mean, I remember playing it, but I don't have it now. I mean, they did come out with one for the Wii, but it features Daniel Craig in the
Not the same.
GoldenEye story. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I mean, it's a great video game, and it's one of the things I was going to ask you about the video games later, but
Oh, sorry.
anyway, next to on to the next question. I'm sorry. 002. Do you have a favorite Bond book?
Danny again. If we're doing full length, it's Casino Royale. I still reread that one. But if we're counting short stories, I'm gonna say from A View to Kill. I like the simplicity and feel of it. That was one I reread a couple of times when just starting for vibe's sake.
Okay, Vita.
Casino Royale for me. I haven't read everything Bond, but I've read a huge chunk of it. But that's the one that I've reread more than once for sure.
Yeah, I find that's a good one to return to, like, and I've obviously read it a number of times, but like it's the one that, like, because it's the first one, I guess when you feel like plowing through the literary series, that's the one that you start with, so it's naturally one that most people have read the most. So no, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in there. Do you?
I like the trying to figure out how to play the card game because it's completely different to anything I've ever played. So I'm always sitting there like, how in the Sam Hill?
Oh yeah, Baccarat. Yeah, the one that gets me is the scene in Moonraker, because I have no idea how to play bridge, and
yes,
I haven't the slightest clue as to what's going on in that game and that scene, but it's still fun to read. Like, Ian Fleming does a great job of actually making those those card games thrilling in their own way. So
it's also funny for me contextually, like, because I came to a lot of the novels a little bit later. Reading him write those card game scenes with that feel of James Bond cool, contextually being someone in my right now who's in my mid 30s, who those are not cool games anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain element of, like, for me, like, bridge was, my babysitter and her friends playing growing up, like watching them play, and then but going and like what Fleming does that's like so amazing, like, and it still works, is reading, and it still feels Bond cool. It still feels the same way that the Texas Hold'em scene in the movie feels to me.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, question number 3. Do you have a favorite Bond girl, or should I say Bond woman, or female character in the series?
Oh boy.
Ooh. I mean, Grace Jones exists, so like, I don't know if that counts.
No,
Michelle
Grace Jones absolutely counts. Yeah, no, that's she's. I mean, I think she's a great character.
So between her and Michelle Yeoh's character in the
okay, yeah. Michelle Yeoh's kicks ass. I mean, she's been doing great in with Star Trek. That Star Trek Discovery.
Gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I love that they found like a new way to kind of bring her back. Because she wasn't like around as much as at least in nothing that I've seen, but recently. So it was great to see her come back again in Star Trek, and then I think she's getting a new series for Section 31, which is great.
She is. I'm so excited.
I saw that and I'm flipping out.
Yeah.
I would probably say I agree with Vita on a character level, but I also have to give an extra shout out to Famke Janssen playing Zinnia Onatopp as an actress playing a Bond woman. Like, because like I don't know if any Bond girl has had as much fun as she clearly did playing that role. I just rewatched it like a couple of weeks ago, so, like when they all dropped on Netflix, all the Pierce Brosnan ones.
Yeah.
And like she enjoys it so much and she hams it up. Like, and those movies can be pretty campy, but she goes above and beyond like any other character in any of those Pierce Brosnan movies and never drops it. So as an actress playing a Bond girl, I think she's my favorite.
Yeah, no, she absolutely put everything into that part. You can tell. I mean, the whole concept of a woman, like killing a man with her thighs. I mean that
So good.
it's so
Perfect.
good.
I just
Speaks
want to
deeply
know.
to me.
I'm just trying to imagine how many times she and Pierce Brosnan read her introduction and had to keep a straight face, because the version that made it to the movie, they didn't keep a straight face.
Yeah.
So like, imagine how many times she had to repeat her name all seriously and they just fell out.
I think also I want to give a shout out to Ava Green as well.
Yeah, she
because-
was pretty amazing. Vesper
Oh my
is
god.
an incredible character, yes. Okay, so question 004. Do you have a favorite Bond actor?
Timothy Dalton. I mean, I love Daniel Craig, but Timothy Dalton's got
Timothy.
that darkness to his eyes.
For me,
Whatever.
it's the reverse. Daniel Craig first, and then Timothy Dalton. Whatever complaints I have about like License to Kill, and none of them are his fault.
Yeah.
And I think that he delivered exactly what could be delivered. And I regret not having more of him. Like he's like,
Yeah.
I love, like I'm not even one of those people who are like anti-Moore. Like I love Moore as well. Like I love all of them for different, sometimes absurd reasons.
Yeah.
But like most of them, I sit there and I'm like, I love the movies we got. With Dalton, I'm like, I wish he had one more movie. I wish he had two more movies.
Yeah.
Like I wish
Same
he
here.
had. Yeah, I wish he had a movie that got to prove the point that he was the right person for the role.
Yeah, I mean, there was a rumor, like there were preliminary treatments done for like what would have been his third film. I would have loved to have seen it. I mean, I don't know if he would have been great in Goldeneye. I guess that's sort of up for debate. But I love Timmy as well. No, that's great to hear. So do you have an earliest Bond memory?
Ooh. I think my earliest memory of watching Bond was actually watching it on my grandparents' old like black and white tube TV. It was on, they had cable and we didn't, so it was on some station. It could have been on network, I don't know, but I remember like just watching, which one was it? I don't remember which one it was, which is terrible because I was very young, but I remember watching it and just being like blown away. I was like, people are just like, I was so used to like superhero stuff, and I was like, this is a regular person, but he's doing all this wild stuff. Like, I can't handle this. This is too much for my tiny brain. Like, yeah.
Danny?
So my youngest memory is actually really silly and tells you the exact kind of nerd house that I grew up in, because I remember being fondly teased and laughed at because I referred to Sean Connery as the guy from Highlander.
Well, there you go. Well, he is the guy from Highlander.
He is the guy from Highlander.
Like that's just where I knew him from first. But not my earliest, but like my strongest memory for Bond, like the one that like is like my first, oh no, like I'm off the deep end, is actually I joke about this so much, and when we watched the movies the other night, my wife finally got to see this scene. The whole end of like Goldeneye and stuff, but specifically, I have a thing with the clicking pen.
Mm-hmm.
It is the single strongest
Yes.
Bond memory on the like for me at all. Like I will sit there, and if I have a clicking pen in my hand, I start doing the 3 clicks. I have to finish the 3 clicks. I don't even have this thing with anything else in my life. But like that scene somehow, like I don't even know, like maybe it was a thing that the first time I ever saw that movie, I didn't see it from the beginning. Like I just caught the end. And so that was one of the first scenes I saw or something like that. I don't remember. But like I sit there and wait for that scene, which is hysterical because the movie just then after that scene, like the last 20 minutes are even more absurd than anything else that happens in the movie. And like, but I need to see that click first. And then I can get hyped for the end of the movie. Like I just need that moment.
Yeah, I mean, so do you have to like disengage that once you do the 3 clicks to make sure that the bomb doesn't go off again before?
Yeah, no, I have to do it. I have to do it like in the right set of 3s. Like it's a thing.
Yeah, no, that is a great scene. Yeah, actually, GoldenEye was like kind of the first Bond movie that my dad kind of took me to the theater to see. I mean, I might have seen others before that, but it's actually my first Bond memory as well. So yeah, no, that's a great thing to remember. All right, so here's question 006. Is there a Bond location you'd like to visit?
Jamaica.
Jamaica?
Yeah, Jamaica.
Go to
Yes.
Jamaica.
Golden
I mean,
Eye.
I sincerely, my Bond location is I actually want to sit at Fleming's desk.
Yes.
I want to sit and write 500 words at his desk.
That's on my bucket list too. Yeah, my wife and I, that I've kind of told her that's kind of like a bucket list item, and she's on board for it. But obviously, it's so
It's a big one.
crazy. It's so crazy expensive that we'll have to start saving, and like maybe for like a 50th anniversary kind of thing we can go. But it's something that I would definitely want to do at some point. Yeah, it's just to sit at that desk and just to take in the atmosphere and the beach and yeah, I'm right with you there with that one. The next question, 007, is do you have a favorite scene from the Bond film series?
My favorite scene right now, they change. It depends on like, I don't know whether Mercury's in retrograde or whatever, but like right now the scene in Casino Royale where he's poisoned and he's playing and then he just calmly gets up to go like salt himself and then just comes back and he's just you could never tell. I'm like, man,
That
I
last
want
hand
to
nearly killed me.
Yo, so good. It's so smooth. I was like, I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, God damn, I want to be even like a fraction that cool, like just even a little bit. Yeah, that's it for me for now.
Danny?
So obviously the pen scene. Me and my wife have just been running around the house whenever we accomplish something and putting our hands up and going, "I am invincible."
Yeah, there you
go. Which is really encouraging. I think I kind of have like two because one of them is like almost it's the gesture more than the scene when he's practicing the guns at the estate in Skyfall and he gets really petulant, but then when he hits the shot he does that little like head wobble that is so childish and immature. And I'm obsessed with it. It's such good body acting. And then the Hong Kong sniper fight scene in the blue lights. Everything about that scene in Skyfall is perfect to me. It's my favorite track on that soundtrack. The way they use the silhouettes in it. The introduction of, one of my biggest crushes and Bond girls on the planet. Like that whole little beat, for me, I just think is kind of like writerly goals in terms of like combat scenes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. All right, so just a couple more left. So what is the most Bond-like or spy-like thing you've ever done?
Oh boy, can I speak to that?
I don't know if I can say all of them. There are two moments. I will not tell the full story to both. One time I mugged my own mugger. I was being mugged and I turned it around. That's a real thing that happened, which I do not suggest.
Favorite,
it's really,
story.
I was very young and very ridiculous. And the second is a couple of years later, I think I want to say I was 19. I was on a train headed back to Manhattan from, I think it was Queens. I think it was the end of the line, Queens. And I was sitting there and I was the only one in the car. It was like, I don't know, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And this dude gets on and he's just ginormous. He's just this very large, scary looking dude. And he comes and he stands in front of me and I'm like, oh, fuck. And like the door's closed. Excuse my language. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You're allowed to curse. No problem.
But yeah, the door's closed. And I was like, this is it. And I'm sitting there and I'm not very tough. but I sometimes look tough. So I was wearing my leather jacket, which was all scuffed up and beat to hell, and my hands in my pockets. And I was like, all right. So I look up at him, and with my offhand, which is my left hand, I reach out of my pocket and I reach into the inner jacket pocket, and I pull out a pack of cigarettes because I smoked at the time. And I have my right hand in my pocket that kind of looked like a knife hand pointed towards him. But he can't see it because it's in my pocket. And I pull out one of the cigarettes and I put it away. And then I reach again, this is my offhand, and I'm praying that I had a Zippo, and I was like, just light, and it lights, and I light the cigarette and I put the thing away and I take a deep inhale. Then I take the cigarette out of my mouth and I blow it at his face, like towards his face. I'm like, do we have a problem? And just as that happened, the train pulled into the next station and he got off. I was like, oh my God. Jesus Christ. And then I stress smoked the entire cigarette in one more breath. Just anyway, that's the coolest thing I've ever done, and I'll never be that cool again.
Vita doesn't intend to, but like switches into cool the second they panic, like about anything. And so only if you like know like the hidden signs, you're like, oh, we need to get Vita out of this scene. But otherwise, they look even chiller and cooler, which is why they're on this book, because that's their natural state.
Right.
Try and channel Dick Grayson as often as possible.
Meanwhile, I am very not James Bond. I am like, I am HQ. I am the person at the computer telling Vita which door is going to open.
Yeah, we make a good team that way.
So Danny's kind of like the Q.
Yeah.
Okay. And Vita's Bond.
A little bit of Q, a little bit of armory. I like fiddling with stuff all the time. One of my recent, not so recent, but one of my hobbies is I'm trying to teach myself how to repair fountain pens very slowly because I'm obsessed with pens, as you've noticed.
Yeah, they've come up quite a bit.
But one of the things, so I think the most Bond thing is the time I had to break into my future wife's house when we were younger, because her and both of her brothers forgot their key. And so I was like, okay, cool. We have to figure out how to get in. And somehow I was able to figure out how to open, because like they had like a basement apartment, but like a basement with like a window part. So I was able to somehow jimmy the window. So I climbed into the apartment, came all the way through and unlocked the door from inside. But like the best part of this story is the window was right by my wife's bed at the time. So she then was like, I didn't sleep for a week because all I could think of was how easily you did that. And I was literally just staying up all night, like terrified. And I was like, I'm sorry, but we needed to get in. So that's probably my Bond story.
Wow. Yeah, so the two of you are far more interesting than me, because I've had to answer these questions too, and my answer for that question has always been I can make scrambled eggs, and I enjoy scrambled eggs. And it's yeah, I wish I had stories that are as cool as yours.
The skill of making good scrambled eggs is incredibly important to survival, and people should respect it more.
100%.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So the last quickfire question. What is your favorite Bond theme song?
Ooh. Oh. Don't do this. Don't do this. Oh man, Tina Turner exists. How do I pick anything but that one? Like I feel like I would get beat up in the streets if I say anything to GoldenEye. I will say I think, man,
I love all I listen to like playlists of all of them. So like this is you know what? I will agree that Tina Turner's is the best, but Another Way to Die is my favorite.
Oh, I enjoy that too.
Like I write combat that's not related to Bond to that song. It's not necessarily the one I listen to the most, but it's the one that I'm like, all right, we're doing this now.
I will say, oh man, You Know My Name is also just
it's so good.
It's so good.
I mean, I wasn't even thinking of that one because you put Chris Cornell into the mix and I just start like kind of like crying and spontaneously combusting.
Yeah, but it's so powerful. Like
Yeah.
that, I don't know,
Yeah.
man. Sometimes when I need to like, gas myself up, I'm like, let's do this. Let's put on this YouTube video with this song.
Yeah, the lyrics are incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I can even pick a favorite. It's like you said, those three are way up there for me as well. There's actually a demo recording of Bono because he wrote the song with The Edge, doing "Goldeneye," and that's a pretty cool thing to listen to too. It's and Tina Turner.
Well, I'm
obviously.
opening YouTube for after this.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Tina is amazing and legendary. So I mean, it's enough not to take away from that version. From the official released one, but yeah, it's just there's just such incredible music in the franchise. I wanted to start off by asking what sets Bond apart from working with other franchises? Because I know I think you've worked with Wonder Woman before and Morbius. So what's different about Bond as opposed to working on those other kind of icon, characters that are attached to other franchises?
For me, Bond, and Danny, I'll get out of the way in a second so you can answer because you've done franchise stuff too. But for me, Bond is his humanity is his strength. Like I've worked with characters who are like superhumans or mutants or monsters or whatever, and it's like the trick about writing them is how do I make a story that's interesting despite them being so powerful. Whereas with Bond, it's like I love being able to problem solve these ridiculous situations that he gets in because it's like, no, we have to ground this in as much reality as possible so that when he does cool stuff, you believe it more even though it's so fantastical, right? So like that scene even in the first issue where he jumps out the window and gets blown up from behind. I was like, in the real life, you're dead. Like that's not true. But you believe it from Bond because then you'll see him bleed later, or you'll see all these little things that make him human. And to me, that's what sets him apart. I love writing a story where you have a problem and you have to be clever to solve it, but the plan B will be to punch it in the face. Like Bond is very clever, very smart. He's incredibly adaptable in a way that very few characters are, just in general, like across the board. I can only think of another 2-3 characters that are their quote unquote superpower is that they have a great, incredible situational awareness. And so being able to kind of maneuver him into places where it's like, I can't out clever this. I'm gonna have to punch it is really fun for me.
Very cool. Danny?
So for me, the thing that sets him apart is the very reason that he was kind of on the bucket list is that no character on this earth has his kind of swagger.
Yeah.
I feel like the closest might arguably be Shaft, and now I just want to write an essay about that now that I've thought of it. But sincerely, like even other characters that like are great and known for that kind of attitude, that smoothness, that adjusting of like the cuffs and the jacket, the ones that are good are almost all inspired by or imitations of Bond, Mm-hmm. He is that cool, that efficiency and that style and flavor that you don't get anywhere else, especially when you add in his very brutal sometimes efficiency. That like you can play him over the top with gadgets, you can play him really rough and rugged like Daniel Craig, or like super, just smooth charm smirks, like more, Pierce or like Sean, but like that swagger is always there no matter what, like no matter how wild everything else gets. And writing a character where, like that is the center makes him so much different.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of was leading to another question that I had because when you have to sit down and write an original Bond story, you kind of have to sort of set who Bond is or define who Bond is for your story. what? How would you? I know you've mentioned your favorites, Timothy Dalton and and Daniel Craig. They're kind of the more grounded, kind of characterizations of Bond. So how did you come to that conclusion that that's kind of the way that you wanted to go? Because obviously you could also decide to go fantastical as well and do completely over the top, and there is a valid kind of way to do that as well. But what made you decide that that's the direction that you wanted to go in?
For me, I mean, Danny and I talked about this extensively. For me, what was interesting about being able to write Bond was to figure out a situation in which he isn't automatically the best at something and see how he would get out of it. And grounding him in a little more reality helps do that. I think it leads to more fun puzzles to solve, even if not literal puzzles, like in terms of writing. Like I really wanted to explore Bond's adaptability and what that means when he is not walking into a situation where he's already the best.
Yeah, I found that sometimes there are like two schools of thought when it comes to Bond. Like there's when it comes to writing a Bond story, there's there's some Bond the films stories that basically stick to a formula, and they kind of find new ways to sort of reinvent the formula. And then there are other Bond stories that are more thinking outside the box, and that they present stories that kind of subvert audience expectations. So where do you think your series, since it's kind of still early in as far as the publications are concerned, in what direction does your series lean into?
So I think when Vita and I were discussing this, especially when we were discussing it with our editor, we wanted to kind of do a little bit of both, which is a little bit of cheating. I very much am of the belief that a world of art forgery works because Bond is out of his depth, but it looks like he should belong, which was a really kind of fun thing to deal with. And so it ends up being this thing where there are beats we want to hit. There are certain classic moments, classic feels that we really want to make sure we land on. In fact, there's one issue, I'm not going to say which number, but there's one issue that I challenged myself specifically to write very traditionally Bond. There's one that's just like full on, like, I'm going to write this with like intense traditional pacing, versus say like the first issue, which we very intentionally were like, we are doing this tonally kind of out there and being a little bit weirder, especially when coming off of Greg Pak's run, which I adore, but isn't weird, Right. It is this really kind of like fun action adventure, nonsense that gets, sometimes very, dark and personal. So we wanted to also make sure that we were telling a story that is very different from what Pak and the rest of the team were doing at that point, which leads us to kind of going back and forth, playing with some really traditional Bond stuff, and then, being like, okay, cool. But in this space, how can we then throw in some really wild, breaking the mold kind of storytelling?
Now, when you do pitch the story, what kind of feedback does Ian Fleming Publications kind of gives you, or guidelines do they give you, and like what are those interactions like? So when you first came up with the idea for your story and you pitched it, did they come back with things that you can and can't do, or is there things that you had to kind of sell them on in order to get your series going?
We worked very closely with our editor, Nate Cosby, to format the pitch and get all of the information in the pitch to a level where there shouldn't be any questions about what we were doing, so that if they had issues, that it was just about the content rather than like, not knowing what was coming. We did an extensive outline. We did like a page by page, basically, for the whole series, just to make sure that we had all of, that we were clear You didn't want any
And
ambiguity about what we were trying to do.
and Nate, fortunately for us, has worked on with the estate previously, so it was
Right.
we were able to have the sort of communication where when we're talking directly to him, he's got a really good sense of what's going to work, what's not going to work, what will work, but only if we do certain, X, Y, and Z with it.
And to be honest, the estate was very open.
Yeah,
us.
super open.
I think we got like 2 notes, and they were very small things that didn't really affect much of the structure at all. And so they were easy to incorporate, and they were like, Godspeed. And I was like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah, I think the only big note we got was so early in the process that like it didn't affect the story that you ended up seeing.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So can you tell us a little bit about your collaborative, how the two of you collaborate? What's your creative process like? Like once you've done the pitch and you've had it approved and you've gotten your notes back, how does the working with in a writing team, how does that, how do you go about doing that? Yeah, but how does the process, take us through the process rather. Sorry.
So the prep stuff, all of that stuff is part of that process, because we want to make sure that we have as much groundwork laid, so when whoever is sitting down to write the first pass of a script will basically look at the outline and go, this is exactly what we're doing, and just kind of break it down into panels. So we went back and forth for a long time on all of that prep stuff, all of that outline stuff. And then, in general, we actually switch off who's writing an issue first and who's doing the notes on the issue. With this, so Danny did first pass on most of them, and then I did like the second pass and revisions on most of them, except for one issue so far.
Okay, and then once, because a lot of our listeners may not know like the process behind the comics, that's why I'm kind of asking these detailed questions. So how closely do you work with the artists? Because I know Eric Gasper has been doing the artwork. Is there a collaborative process with him in terms of determining how the issues look once you do write the story?
So what's super fun about working with Eric is one, the fact that like he was on previous books, so like he kind of same with Rosh on colors and Ariana on letters, so it was very super already supportive team that worked together really well. And then there was a lot of collaboration in terms of character design with Eric, which was super fun. Mostly I am, at least for me, and I think Vita kind of feels the same, that we are working with artists because you don't ever want us to draw something. So we are very much of the, cool, we've scripted this out like this, and then go asterisk, but if this is dumb, draw it how you want and we'll figure it out. So we let Eric take a lot of lead there, although the one thing that we tend to give a lot of reference for tends to be fashion. That tends to be like the part in art that we're like, cool, this is what we have in mind.
And that is mostly because we really like fashion.
Yeah.
Our job, and to be fair, I think every artist that I've worked with across the board has been incredibly good about kind of having an idea of what makes sense fashion-wise, contextually. But like, it's just really fun to look up fashion stuff and go, this is what we envision, and also we've saved you some time so you don't have to do it.
Especially with Bond, because like I can talk for hours about how like so one of my favorite threads posted like of all time on Twitter was not about Bond, but it was actually about Batman, where Kurt Busiek went on this whole thread about how important what kind of suit and what cut Bruce wears and how that matters. That fashion wise, that's telling you what part of his persona he's giving off, how tailored it is, the way that it's tailored. And I feel like that is so important across the board for Bond that for me, unlike some other books or some other characters, I am envisioning fashion as part of their character bio in a way that I wouldn't necessarily always do on every book. But so much of it is about like that sleekness that like when we are going back and forth and talking about character design or like character personality and who they are in a scene, you know, like there's so much little like subtle stuff that happens in Bond that it's really fun to delve into.
Yeah, I mean, there are a whole bunch of websites dedicated to just the wardrobe, the suits of Bond.
It's so much fun.
It's crazy.
So good.
It's not an area that I have any expertise in, but I know a lot of people who do, and I always find that stuff fascinating. But I've never been able to sort of dive into it as much as others. So I mean, I always, my go-to joke with my Bond friends is like, I'm open to give fashion suggestions, and those people who know me know that I'm joking.
For me, back in college, I almost went the academic route instead of comics writing. And one of the main things that I was interested in was actually color theory in regards to superhero costuming was kind of like my big thing. And like how the costume design matters on like an academic analytic level. So like, I am the person who is like analyzing personality by like the cut of an outfit on Project Runway and what kind of person would wear that. So like this is fun time for me.
Yeah.
I'm the person who does like tabletop role play, and at the beginning of every scene, you're going to wait 30 seconds while I pull up the picture of the outfit I've decided my character is wearing because it matters.
Our artists are long suffering. Our collaborators are long suffering. Now, we in general, being as open and communicative with collaborators as possible is really important. Not just like it's not a vision that we're trying to enact. It's much more like I actually like to hear from collaborators like, oh, what kind of stuff do you want to draw, or do you want to color in, or like what would like how can we all do this so that everyone's job is less stressful? And that alone as a tool is really important, I think, too.
Especially on Bond. Like, I think we definitely, like, we made the thing where, like, what kind of thing do you want to see? Like, do you want to do more explosive heavy, or do you want to do more close combat heavy? Like, having those conversations at the beginning really helped formulate, I think, some of what we do in the story.
Very cool. Now I know you're also contributing to, I guess, an anthology series issue called Reflections of Death, which I think is 6 short stories collected. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know what we're allowed to say.
I think our general storyline is out in the open. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say that it's the cage, like the framing device?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I never know what I'm allowed to say at any given time. So we were lucky enough to be asked to be a part of this project, and the way that it shook down, which is really cool and really interesting for us as writers, is that we were writing a framing story for the other stories. So we are the ties that bind together the rest of the book. I'm super stoked. Danny can elaborate, but I'm stoked about that.
So our story essentially starts very early on with Moneypenny getting kidnapped and interrogated in relation to Bond and his history. And so each of the stories are someone in that scene, often Moneypenny, but not necessarily so, telling a story about an official or unofficial mission that Bond was on. And we're really fortunate to be part of a large team of creators, a lot of whom have written Bond before, some of whom, haven't, and, artists and colorists who are all kind of in the same boat, kind of a mixture of who's touched the classic before and who hasn't. And and then all of us being tied together by Ariana Maher's wonderful lettering.
Oh, so good. She doesn't, I don't think that in general we talk about letterers enough, but she is absolutely brilliant. Incredible.
She is, her work on every project she's been in. But one of the things when we first started this, and I was looking through PAX Run and seeing Ariana's lettering work, as someone who comes from prose, sound effects are really difficult for me. Like particularly so. I don't think in them. It's not something that happens naturally. But like I was looking at Ariana's work and going, I cannot let her skill be wasted on a book that doesn't get cool sound effects. So like it was really like working with her on like a real deep level was like a push to level up my own skill to be kind of worthy of what of her craft.
Oh, very cool. Tell us. Well, I know I mentioned the Bond video games before. So, do you guys have a favorite video game
for Bond or just
for Bond? Sorry.
I actually did not get
GoldenEye will forever the original.
Yeah, the original's pretty up there.
There's a mode that you could just kill people with one hit, like the License to Kill mode, and I would just be Baron Samedi and hide in like you can't hide because he has the big hat, but like I would just hide behind things and karate chop people's ankles. It was the best thing. That's one of my favorite games of all time.
Weirdly enough, considering how big of like a video game head I am, it's like I may love them more than comics. I don't know. I love video games a lot, and I can talk about them for hours. Because when I was younger, I was a Sega only person and did not do a lot of. I basically only did JRPGs and Sonic. So since I never had like the big systems that like people played like GoldenEye on, like any of the Nintendo systems until much later, I never got to play it. Later on, like I watched like, playthroughs and stuff like that. My wife, owns it and I've watched her play it a bit. But it is like the embarrassing gap for me in terms of Bond media.
Yeah, no, I kind of had I always had Nintendo, so I remember playing the GoldenEye game, but I don't know what happened to it because, once you grow up and you move, but I eventually ended up getting the one that they released for Wii, and my son loves it, and we play each other all the time, and, he enjoys, firing on me and all that stuff. So, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, what are you looking forward to in No Time to Die?
Everything.
Yeah.
Like this is like my house is like on countdown for it. My wife gets annoyed when I shove my phone in her face, but she accepts it for trailers. Oh my gosh. The cast is so amazing, and I have so many personal fan theories about how the movie's going to shake out, particularly the end. And I know that I could be wrong about all of them. But it's super duper exciting to me because I know that Daniel Craig was not for a long time into doing another one. And it's kind of the same like with Patrick Stewart, where it's like, oh, he did Picard. It must have been worth it. Like, and I feel like that's going to happen with this movie, that like, oh, what was in the script, Daniel Craig was like, okay, this is worth coming back for. And I'm super excited to see those moments, as well as, like, obviously, like, the new cast and, like, Lashana Lynch. I'm super excited to see what they do with her.
I'm excited to see what they do as well, yeah. With
every clip of her and Craig interacting in a scene, just, like, I just become a small child. I'm like, yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, she does look super cool.
She looks so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They just dropped that Super Bowl trailer, and they're in that jet plane, and she's strapped in there, as the pilot, and it's just it looks. I mean, I just can't wait. It's going to be amazing. And then there's also a scene I think that's set in Cuba, and she's all she's in the gear, and she's firing at somewhere, and it just looks amazing. would the events of No Time to Die affect what you might do in the comics going forward? If presuming that you continue the Bond series that you're doing.
No, because the comic verse is its own kind of universe. It does gently touch things that happen kind of in the larger Bondosphere, but it is its own kind of like timeline and its own continuity. And so like if we were to continue, would we be inspired by it? I don't know, maybe. I don't know. But not explicitly, no.
Okay.
It's definitely the sort of Bond movies are the sorts of movies that no matter what, when I see them, especially for the first time, I find myself later that night sitting and writing no matter what time I came home from the movie. Like, they are deeply inspiring to me, and like, because they hype me up. Like, I get so excited. Even when they do things that like frustrate me, or, like I just want to sit and write, so whether or not something, if we got to, like continue Bond, like whether something that inspired me from the movie would end up there, or it would end up inspiring and informing other projects of mine. I don't know, but I find them pretty inspirational on a creative level.
Very cool. So if you had the reins to take over the Bond franchise after No Time to Die, what would you do?
Ooh. I'm going to give my joke answer.
Okay.
Which is a callback to a cartoon that was not good, but that I love dearly, James Bond Jr.
Yes.
I would definitely just James Bond Jr. it up. Like, I couldn't help myself. If they let me do whatever I wanted, I might actually just bring in James Bond Jr. But in it's probably not true. That's probably not true. So if anyone is thinking about letting me be in charge of James Bond, I semi-promise not to do
that. Well, I know there has been talk about like expanding the Bond series, and I could see them sort of. I could see like maybe not James Bond Jr. exactly, but some kind of animated series that's kind of like separate from the cinematic universe, and that is its own thing. I could see that working, like maybe something on Netflix or something. I could. Obviously, it would have to be developed, and they would have to create the thing in a way that would make sense for today. But I could actually think that would be an interesting thing to do.
It might be
would
fun.
Be sold.
It might be fun. I mean, the less jokey answer is, how do you? I think you have to explore things about Bond that haven't been explored yet, right? Every cycle of Bond tries to do that, and I think largely succeeds. So I think maybe the next step is something like a young Bond, not because we don't know where he's going to end up, but because we already know where he's going. Exploring where he came from might be interesting.
Yeah, there was that Young Bond series of books that came
I
out.
remember those.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah, I enjoyed them.
Yeah,
I would
love
them again.
I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing, like I said, like either an animated version or a live action like adaptation of those books, or even if they're not like directly adapting those books, just some kind of you can mine those books and sort of update them and create new stories around set around that time frame of Bond's life. So yeah, I could see that working. That would be. I would love for them to do something like that, actually.
I would say if I'm expanding, like obviously you still want like the core Bond stuff, but the things that I would be most interested in if I was in charge is I want like in-depth work, be it movie or novel series. I think would also be really great because it could be really internal of M, like Judi Dench's version of M and her rise, because I think that there's something for her to have gotten in the position she is as a woman, and the timeline of when she would have been working is incredibly fascinating to me. And also, like, she would have had to have some really messed up stuff in her, like, past to have gotten to that position. And I think that there's, like, a really interesting wealth of story that could be there. And, I mean, he's my favorite secondary character, so I always have to say I just want more Felix.
Oh, more Felix Leiter. Yeah. Yeah, I would. Actually, there was a Bond fan poster somebody posted, and it was Olivia Colman as the young Judi Dench M. Juxtaposed with Judi Dench as M. And, they kind of did like a mock movie poster. And I would totally go see that movie. I'd line up to see that movie now, actually.
Heck yeah.
That would be such a great, like kind of an outside the box thing to do. But it definitely, I could see a lot of people being interested in that. Obviously, there's also been some talk about Naomi Harris possibly getting a Moneypenny movie, although it doesn't seem to be greenlit or official or going anywhere. But I could see that working on some level as well, or
that
maybe
would be
even
so much fun,
or maybe even the Jeffrey Wright Felix Leiter series, a film or a streaming show or something like that. I would love to see any of those things, actually.
Yeah, if they did more stuff with Moneypenny, that'd be amazing. I know one of my personal favorite things to work on in this, and like checking that off the bucket list, was getting to write Moneypenny Bond flirtation.
Yes. Yes.
Like, it's such a classic part of Bond.
Yeah.
That getting to actually write those scenes, like, and like hear it in my head and know that like those are the words that we're working on, like that was up there with, like the Armorer in, issue 2, or issue 2? No.
Yeah.
Wherever he shows it's Bond. It's not a spoiler that the Armorer that the Armorer shows up. That like getting to write that interaction, those incredibly, like classic beats of that were really, really fun. So any of that I would line up immediately.
Oh, very cool. Thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to checking out your series, and I'm really excited to see how Mr. Big comes into the story. So that's one thing I wasn't expecting to see, and I was like, wow, this is going to be really cool. So I'm really eager to read more issues and to just dive more into your series. So I know, like I said, as of this recording, only 2 issues are out, but they tend to come out every month. So I will be following along.
Thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, and thank you for having us. This was a blast.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for listening to James Bond Radio. Thank you so much for listening to my interview with Vita and Danny. I'm looking forward to diving further into their ongoing James Bond comic series. They're also involved with the new anthology coming out called Reflections in Death, which is an anthology of short stories, which looks really cool. So hopefully we can touch base with Vita and Danny at some point in the future as the ongoing series, the story of it continues to unfold. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for listening to James Bond Radio. I've been Jack Lugo. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Good night.